From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. I am Nick Barris. It is a Wednesday, and this is a live program coming to you. I like to say that when we've come back after the long holiday, and we've been back for a few weeks now, but folks were getting used to the taped shows because so many people were off. Live and direct to you this morning on the Plus. If you'd like to join in the conversation, we'll get the phone number up there in a moment. Yeah, this is a time we're in the new year where we're looking at things that affect us financially and the economy and the like. And the bottom line is we have some pretty rough inflation right now. And I think when we hear the term inflation, most of us get an idea of what it means, but maybe can't do a really good job of explaining it. We're going to get into the details of the economy, the inflation, the cost of things and how much money you make and how much you have to spend, and also getting into the whole issue of supply chain issues and how some of that is affecting us. I don't know. If you've been in a position lately to try to say, for instance, buy a car, new or used, good luck with that. I mean, it's expensive to begin with, no matter what. And if you want certain new cars, you get on a waiting list. And I'm not talking about a Ferrari as if you could afford that anyway, but I'm talking about any just basic vehicles. Supply chain, and that's just a good one example of how it plays out. We're going to get into all of that. Take some of your questions, maybe your observations with Dr. Richard Tarpey joining us this morning from over at MTSU. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you on. You know inflation. You know supply side. You teach this stuff.
I do.
All right, inflation. As I said, I think if we did a quiz, most of us could give an idea of what inflation means. The very term itself kind of explains it. But what are we seeing right now as we look at this nation's economy, inflation, and how and why it's happening?
Okay. As always, it's not an easy answer, right?
Sure.
So inflation, essentially, everybody knows inflation is the cost of everything goes up, right? So there's three kinds of inflation, or three main causes of inflation. There's demand side or demand pool inflation, which is essentially where demand is stimulated for goods to the point where people want a lot of things and the things aren't available.
Supply demand, yeah.
Costs go up.
Gotcha.
Right? So if I only have so much of a product to sell and everybody wants it, I'm going to raise my price. And then there's the supply side, or cost push is what we call it, but it's supply side inflation, which basically is an event that constricts the supply of goods and services. Same result, fewer supply of goods or lower supply of goods, people still have demand, cost goes up.
An example of that could be all those ships stalled off the coast, the West Coast, where the supply of items coming in from China or elsewhere have been stalled out there because they weren't able to offload the merchandise.
Exactly.
And so that's supply. Okay, gotcha.
So normally we have one or the other. Well, the third type of inflation is just what we call built-in inflation. That's just general inflation of prices rising over time. Prices rise, wages go up, prices rise, wages go up. We call that the price-wage spiral. Right? That's the inflation that the Fed typically targets, the Federal Reserve targets on a regular basis. Right now, they're targeting 2%. We always want some inflation that shows the economy's growing.
It's growing, yeah.
Right. So you don't want stagflation.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing. The term inflation, people think, oh, is that bad? No, you want to have it. Well, what's the opposite of inflation?
Stagflation. Right. And that's when everything's going down. Everybody thinks, hey, costs will go down of goods. That's good up to a point. But as costs start going down, then wages start going down, and you end up in a downward spiral. Japan's a great example of that in the 90s, who had about a decade of stagflation, and their economy went nowhere. It didn't grow. It stayed stagnant for a decade, almost a decade. Okay. So you don't want that either. So now, right now, well, let me go back. So in our economy's history, we typically have either demand causes or supply causes of inflation. So if we look at the late 60s, when inflation really started up, the last time, the last bout we've had of inflation in the 70s. Everybody remembers the 70s, who's old enough to remember the 70s.
I remember.
So a lot of demand in the late 60s, suburbs were growing, we had the start of inflation. And then we had the two oil embargoes in 73 and 79. That caused supply side constrictions. We had no oil, couldn't transport goods couldn't get anywhere, so our supply constricted. Inflation really went up in the late 70s and 80s. Our economy now, and I say this all the time, I think last time I was here I had the same answer, we're in uncharted territory now. Okay. We have both demand and supply problems in our economy. So we kind of have a double whammy of inflation. We have a lot of pent-up demand from people coming out of the pandemic. We then turned around and gave them all money, right? The $1,500 that went out, and now we have the additional $300 going out per month for child credit. I forgot what the exact amount is. We're talking about more stimulus coming out. So we've stimulated the economy, and we also have a severe constriction of the supply of goods. And services, because we've closed things down. Right now, things are open. Depending on where you're in the country, things are closed again. Right in the Northeast, New York, Chicago, they started closing things again because of the COVID-19. So we have both stimulated demand and we have constricted supply. So we have both ends smashing us into inflation.
Has that not happened to this degree in U.S. history?
Not that I'm aware of. I have not found a time where we've had both of those particular dynamics affecting us at the same time.
And of course, then I would say, and you mentioned it twice, I mean, that COVID is the X factor that we've never had something like this in U.S. history to this degree. I mean, a lot of people can point to whether, politicians are to blame for this or that. I don't care who's president, be it Donald Trump or Joe Biden, Obama, Bush, whatever, they would be saddled with this situation right now. Now, I guess, because COVID, it's beyond anyone's control to that degree. So that's where we sit. We're hopefully coming out of it slowly but surely, as you said, as we get these vaccines going. How high is the inflation right now comparatively to recent years in this country?
So the last I saw, the December numbers were up 7%. Our inflation was 7%.
Okay. And who does that hit hardest?
That hits your lower and middle income folks hardest. Right. So it's 7%, and the bulk of that inflation has been in food and energy.
So that means they're paying more for a loaf of bread?
Loaf of bread, gas for their cars,
gasoline,
necessities. Right, so if luxury goods go up, not a lot of people have to have luxury goods, right? Things such as, I don't know, jewelry.
I don't need that caviar.
Exactly.
Okay.
Good example. So core inflation has gone up on food and energy, which that hits everybody, but it hits your lower and middle income people the most, right? So everybody has to buy food, everybody has to buy gas for their cars. So food, we'll start with food. That's an interesting one. We've heard about, most everybody's heard about the whole meat problem, right? So we know meat's gone up much more than 7%. It's skyrocketed.
Meat in general, but especially, I mean, you can still get a package of chicken thighs or chicken legs, which I actually like just roasting those. They're good. To me, I still think it's a great value. And pork. Beef is insane.
Beef is
insane.
insane.
Why is it just because of the cost of cows or how it goes? I mean, why is it so much more expensive than poultry and pork? Because, I mean, seriously, beef. I like a beef steak. I mean, and you go and look for a ribeye, modest size one, at any of these grocery stores, and you're talking $14. Not going to do it. But I don't even know how they're selling it. Who's paying $14 for one lousy steak?
Somebody's buying it because it's gone when you go.
During some of the rush with the snow. But I mean, if I have my choice, I'm looking at that and I'm like, wow, well, I'll buy a pork chop or I'll buy some chicken instead. Why beef? I mean, I'll let you get to food as a whole, but do you have a thought on that? I don't know.
Beef's the most popular meat.
Okay.
Right. So everybody buys beef.
Yeah.
They sell more beef than chicken and pork. Over the years. So beef is just the more popular. So
maybe it's a supply thing, because I'm just wondering if also the cost to produce beef because of what cows require is more. I don't know. I mean, it's so much more than just, I think, demand on beef. There must be something going on
there. The production costs of beef are higher than poultry.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. I don't know about pork. I can't really answer that one.
Yeah. Well, it's spendy stuff. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you, except I know exactly what you're saying. The costs of some things are just off the charts. Bacon?
Yeah, well, I like the path you're going down, because you bring up another issue that we really haven't talked about, and that is really the consolidation of the producers. Right, so we've heard about this. The White House has actually talked about meat, and they've talked about investigating the producers of meat. Right, meat in the United States, meat producers in the United States has become very concentrated to about 4 major companies.
It's like Hormel. Are you talking about things like
Tyson, Smithfield?
Okay, yeah, right.
There's 3 or 4 big meat producers.
Big ones, right.
Now, when you have consolidation to that degree, you have a lot of pricing power.
Is that a monopoly?
It's not quite a monopoly, right? You're down to 3 or 4.
Yeah.
However, you do have pricing power across those limited number of producers. So you don't have a lot of competition. right? So you don't have somebody coming in and saying, well, I'm going to undercut you by 20% on beef. It's not going to happen.
And they're not allowed to collude.
They're not.
But it probably happens. They get on the phone late at night. They're talking, hey,
legally, they're not allowed to.
Okay.
That's right. We don't know what they do. I mean, the White House has accused them of many things in the last couple months, and supposedly going to investigate. I don't think they're going to find any evidence of the meat producers getting together in a secret room saying, let's charge more money.
Right.
It's kind of like, if you think about gasoline, you always wonder about gasoline. Okay, the station on the corner is $2.85. And so is the station on the other side of the corner. Well, this station goes up to $2.95. Tomorrow, this one goes up to $2.96. And you think, well, they got to be talking to each other. Well, you know, it's really just the prices. If I see that my competitor's gone up, I'm going up too. Right, up to a certain degree. Maybe I'll go a penny less than them.
But is that, do you think it's doing it because you see the competitor, or is it based on what you're paying the supplier? The stations.
Both. You know, you have to take both into account.
Yeah.
So it's essentially, I'm going to charge as much as consumers are willing to pay.
Okay.
Right. There's going to be a point where if I raise my prices too much, consumers will stop buying.
Except with gas, if everyone's the same, you have no choice. You have to buy gas.
Exactly.
But you could be someone who just undercuts the others to make more money. This is really interesting to me. We have to take a break.
Okay.
We can come back. Let's pick up on that thought. Let's talk about food and goods like that, and then more. As we're talking about inflation, just curious how you've observed it affecting your life. If you have a question or an observation, I think we're all paying a little bit more. And another question for him later in the show is, are people getting paid more? We know a lot of employers now are desperate for help and hiring, and you can make more money these days. We'll talk a little bit about that as well when we come back right after this. Stay with us.